This is Barry Zalma speaking for Claim School Incorporated. Today we speak about the April 1, 2022 issue of Zalma's Insurance Fraud Letter, Volume 26, Number 7. Some of the articles you will be able to read are available in PDF format that can be found by clicking on my blog, zalma.com/blog, and clicking on the link to the fraud letter, where you can read both the April 1 issue and the March 15 issue. Today's issue will start with a story about a Russian immigrant who was convicted of fraud and found that he must leave the U.S. Alexei Legasov, a convicted insurance fraud perpetrator, petitioned the United States Circuit Court and Court of Appeal for review of a final order of removal. The court, after reviewing all of the facts that Legasov, a Russian citizen who has lived in the United States since 1993, was convicted in 2018 in New Jersey of insurance fraud, operating a corporation for criminal purposes. He was sentenced to prison terms of 4 and 5 years respectively and ordered to pay $1.2 million in restitution. He was eventually, if you read the full article, sent back to the kind application of Russian justice and the mercy of Mr. Vladimir Putin. In addition, you will read about many quotes of wisdom and about how the pandemic resulted in less workers' compensation fraud claims because most people were staying home and had no opportunity to get injured while working. You will read about Insurance Fraud Volumes 1 and 2, second edition, which are now available and were just completed. And you can find them as both Kindle books, paperbacks, and hardcovers at Amazon.com by simply putting in the words insurance fraud and my last name in the search bar. There are also links to the purchases on the newsletter. You will read about good news from the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud, listing multiple convictions for insurance fraud. You will read an article called "A Prisoner States a Frivolous Cause of Action for Fraud" and has it thrown out as he acting in propria persona, acting as his own lawyer and in forma pauperis, as a person who hadn't the money to even pay for a filing fee, was allowed to file his claim only to have it done away with. The court concluded that the plaintiff did not state a cause or a claim because the complaint does not allege a violation of plaintiff's constitutional rights or federal law. In addition, the plaintiff did not state a claim because the complaint does not allege the involvement of any federal officials or persons acting under color of state law. Instead, the complaint involves the conduct of a single defendant who happens to be a private actor, and therefore Mr. Legasov is on his way back to Russia. The newsletter then lists health insurance fraud convictions for the last 15 days, which includes a person who used fake signatures, drug addicts, and the homeless to defraud the insurance industry and the federal insurance programs, and found herself serving 130 months in federal prison, about a man who admitted his role in a $35 million pharmacy compounded medication scheme, an ambulance company that was ordered to pay over $600,000 to settle allegations it submitted improper claims, a person who was guilty of health care fraud, money laundering, and theft of public money, an addiction treatment facility whose medical director was convicted in a $112 million addiction treatment fraud, and many, many more convictions. In addition, there is an article called A Man by Dog Story, where Geico sued the fraud perpetrators, and because of the inadequacy of the state fraud division, fraud bureaus, district attorneys, and state's attorneys to prosecute insurance fraud, it became incumbent on the insurance industry to emulate Geico by suing fraud perpetrators, like the healthcare providers in that case. ZIFL can only hope that Geico obtains a writ of execution from the court and makes every effort to collect on the judgment. There is also an article on why a settlement of a fraud suit brought by another insurer, like Geico, Farmers, who, for some reason, after the defendants reached a partial summary judgment, decided to enter into a settlement with the Crooked Docs, and then returned the kindness by suing Farmers and other insurers for the tort of bad faith. Fortunately, the Court of Appeals of Oregon concluded that the trial court erred in denying the special motion to strike, and it therefore reversed the limited judgment and remanded the case to the trial court for entry of a judgment dismissing plaintiff's case, because the plaintiff had not met the burden to present prima facie evidence of a lack of probable cause, and that the trial court erred as a matter of law in denying the defendant's special slap motion to strike. Farmers and the other insurer defendants should be honored for proactively working to defeat a fraudulent claim by not taking the case to trial after losing a partial summary judgment motion and stipulating the case was resolved in favor of the plaintiff. They invited his suit. The Oregon Court of Appeal looked at the evidence and found that the insurers had probable cause to sue Dr. Mohabir and dismissed the suit. The lesson to be learned by insurers was that they should have taken Dr. Mohabir to trial on the causes that they could have proved were fraudulent. Settlement is not appropriate. It is never appropriate when evidence of fraud exists. The newsletter also includes other insurance fraud convictions, including a murder for hire insurance fraud, and insurance fraud in Korea, insurance fraud being a violent crime resulted in life in prison for murder for a life insurance money collection, a case dealing with a person being found guilty for helping honestly named criminal insurer called Fraud Guarantee, which was, of course, a fraudulent entity. How Zurich won a court case in the United Kingdom as a defendant pleads guilty to fraudulent motor claims, and a UK serial fraudster was convicted and sentenced to only 6 months in prison. In addition, you will find links to Zalma on insurance blog postings for the last 10 days, a link to true crime stories of insurance fraud, videos explaining how insurance fraud can be defeated and how it succeeds. And you will hopefully have learned sufficient information to allow you to be a professional insurance fraud deterrer and a person who will be able to not only deter but defeat insurance fraud claims. Thank you for your attention.